pristine marble corridor echoed with hurried footsteps. A young woman, tears streaking her cheeks, clutched her rounded belly as she moved urgently through heavy double doors. A powerful man's voice thundered behind her, threatening to tear apart everything she held dear beneath glittering chandeliers and the looming presence of a courtroom. Their worlds collided, money, betrayal, and scandal swirling like a storm ready to erupt. This is the story of a pregnant wife left to give birth alone, and a ruthless tycoon brought to his knees by truth and the shocking arrival of twins that changed everything. Elena Morris wasn't born into privilege. Her father had been a retired electrician from Springfield, Illinois, and her mother a part-time librarian with a love for classic literature. Elena grew up understanding the worth of every dollar and knew from an early age that life offered no shortcuts. At 16, she took her first job bussing tables at a small diner to save up for community college. Her dream was to attend a respected university if she could find a way to afford the tuition. At 19, luck found her. She received a philanthropic scholarship funded by real-life billionaire Claudia Harmon. With that scholarship, Elena transferred to the prestigious Eastbridge University, where she majored in economics. Between grueling assignments and late-night study sessions, she volunteered at campus food drives. Her humility and genuine warmth drew people to her. She was always the listener, the one asking about others' dreams, rarely talking about her own. Then came Julian Carter. He wasn't just another privileged student on campus. He was the son of business titan Graham Carter, famous for his empire of luxury resorts and commercial skyscrapers spanning the Midwest. Julian's arrival at Eastbridge made headlines. Photographers snapped shots of him arriving in a custom, vintage Bentley, rumored to cost more than most homes. His father's influence opened doors without effort. Yet behind the extravagant lifestyle, Julian carried a charisma that was impossible to ignore. His wit, confidence, and sharp business instincts made him the centerpiece of every social circle. Elena and Julian first crossed paths as partners for a macroeconomics assignment. She was reserved, dressed in a basic t-shirt and jeans, while Julian arrived in a perfectly tailored blazer, disregarding the informal student dress norms. Elena braced herself for arrogance, but Julian surprised her with a warm, genuine smile. He praised her for her precise financial models and seemed genuinely interested in her background. Their project meetings soon turned into coffee dates, then dinners, and eventually late-night walks around the campus. For Elena, it felt like a dream. Not long after they both graduated, Julian invited her to a glamorous gala at the Carter family's flagship hotel in Chicago. The experience felt surreal to Elena, watching celebrities and CEOs effortlessly mingle as strobe lights danced across the ballroom floor while the band played. That night, Julian pulled her aside to a quiet balcony, overlooking a skyline glittering with high-rises. He confessed that he had fallen in love with her sincerity and strength. Before she could fully react, he slipped a diamond ring onto her finger, promising a future beyond her wildest imagination. It was just the beginning. Marrying Julian promised a life of luxury. She truly believed they'd be an unstoppable team, her disciplined work ethic paired with his expansive network. But what she didn't yet realize was that behind the polish and tailored suits, old rivalries and buried secrets simmered. Just 6 months into their marriage, Elena noticed subtle changes in Julian's demeanor. Though he remained affectionate in public, he began locking himself in his study at odd hours, taking calls Elena wasn't meant to overhear. Sometimes at 3 a.m., she would wake to the faint glow of his phone screen as he messaged a contact saved under strange names, Investor 1, Merchant, or just X. If she questioned him, he would offer a tight-lipped smile and say, "Just business." To stay grounded, Elena immersed herself in charity work. She volunteered at a local women's support center and launched education initiatives for underserved youth. These efforts reconnected her to her modest beginnings and gave her a renewed sense of purpose. She wished she could share that passion with Julian, but he always dismissed her stories with a simple nod. "We can just write a check," he'd say. "Money moves faster than spending all day volunteering." Elena would push back, insisting that meaningful change required a human connection, but they never resolved that difference. Even at Carter family gatherings, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Graham Carter, a silver-haired man with a commanding presence, often grilled Julian about his long-term vision for the Carter business empire. He questioned how much influence Elena had over his son's direction. Graham's wife, Margaret, offered cold politeness regarding Elena with the air of someone who believed she didn't quite belong. Julian's mother avoided confrontation, but her eyes always gave away her disapproval. Then, one day, Elena stumbled upon a note in the pocket of Julian's coat. It was a small, curled scrap of paper. It read, "We must finalize the deal. No more delays, S." The scribbled message made her heart pound. Who was S? A woman? A business partner? Anxiety gnawed at Elena, though she had no concrete reason to assume the worst. Over the next several weeks, she convinced herself it was just business. She loved Julian and wanted to believe in him. In the Carter world, secrecy was as routine as morning headlines. Every major deal was cloaked in confidentiality until contracts were signed. Still, a seed of unease had taken root. Elena had been raised in a household where honesty was sacred and secrets frowned upon. Even though she told herself Julian was simply under pressure, she occasionally glimpsed unfamiliar phone numbers in his call logs or vague texts about late board meetings. Each sign sharpened her instincts. She knew something big was brewing behind the polished doors of their life, and that sooner or later it would erupt. A year into their marriage, Elena began experiencing dizzy spells and morning nausea. At first, she chalked it up to stress. The demands of being married to a corporate heir had transformed her once balanced days into a whirlwind of social events and high expectations. But something felt different this time. The nausea came in waves that knocked her off her feet. Her body felt foreign, her emotions raw. She found herself pausing in the middle of chores, resting a trembling hand on her abdomen, wondering, could it be? Her heart dared not hope. Not yet. But after one particularly dizzy episode, she went to see her gynecologist. The blood work and ultrasound confirmed what she hadn't dared to suspect. She was pregnant. Elena sat in stunned silence in the examination room, fingers tightening around the fabric of her skirt. The doctor's voice faded into the background as 1,000 thoughts collided in her mind. She was going to be a mother. Tears welled up, not out of sadness, but from the terrifying beauty of it all. She pressed her hand gently to her belly, suddenly aware that she was no longer alone. A flood of emotions surged through her. Joy, fear, hope, and uncertainty. How would Julian take the news? Lately, their conversations had been shadowed by work obligations and Graham's looming presence. Still, she remembered the passionate, devoted man she married. Maybe the baby would bring them closer again, heal the distance that had crept between them. That evening, she gathered her courage and told him. Julian sat at the head of their long mahogany dining table, flipping through financial reports, candlelight dancing across his face. Elena's heart pounded in her chest as she said quietly, "Julian, I'm pregnant." She braced for a range of emotions, but not the stunned stillness that followed. For a second, he was frozen. Then he suddenly broke into a wide grin, lifting her into his arms in a tight embrace. "That's incredible," he whispered. "You've just made me the happiest man alive." For the next few days, Julian's focus was completely on Elena and the baby. He talked excitedly about converting a wing of the house into a nursery, filled with imported furnishings and playful murals. Elena, relieved by his joy, finally allowed herself to breathe. But fate doesn't favor illusions for long. A storm of accusations, hidden deals, and heartbreak would soon tear through the life they had carefully constructed. It started with an early morning phone call from Elena's friend, Naomi Brooks, a sharp-eyed journalist for the Chicago Sentinel. The moment Elena answered, Naomi's voice crackled with urgency. "I'm so sorry you're hearing it from me, but my team is breaking a story about Julian. It's big." Elena's stomach turned. "What kind of story?" "There's talk of financial misconduct, money being funneled through a shell company. They're linking it to Julian. It involves offshore accounts, tax evasion. It's serious. The DOJ is investigating. If the charges stick, he could face indictment." Elena sank onto the couch, her hand pressing against her belly. She felt faint. "I wanted you to know before it hits the headlines," Naomi continued. "I can't say for sure how much is true yet, but the fact that federal investigators are involved, it's real." Her mind raced, disjointed and loud. She stared blankly at the wall as if it might offer clarity. Julian, her Julian, embroiled in something this big? A voice inside her screamed in denial, while another whispered, "You've known something was wrong. You just didn't want to face it." That evening, when Julian returned home, Elena confronted him. His face drained of color. He dismissed the allegations as lies, a smear job orchestrated by a jealous rival. He pulled her into a tense embrace, whispering, "My attorneys are on top of it, trust me." But the warmth of his touch no longer reached her. It felt rehearsed, hollow, a performance she had seen too many times before. But her trust had already begun to fracture. As the story exploded across media outlets, reporters camped out near the Carter estate's gates. Tabloids plastered Julian's face under scandalous headlines. Elena couldn't leave the house without seeing his name in bold across newspapers and gossip sites. She withdrew inward, trying to protect her health. The stress made her physically ill. What had once been hope for the future now curled into a constant, gnawing ache in her stomach. Nights became the hardest. She'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling the emptiness beside her grow heavier. She clutched her belly and whispered reassurances to the child inside, trying to convince herself as much as her baby that they would be okay. One evening, Graham Carter showed up at their door flanked by legal advisors. He gave Elena a curt nod before storming into Julian's study. She heard voices rise through the thick walls, words like liability, reputation, and damages slamming into one another. When Graham left near midnight, his expression was icy. He didn't even glance in Elena's direction. Left alone with Julian, she pleaded, "Please, tell me what's happening. I can't live like this." Julian avoided her gaze. "I'm handling it, Elena. Don't stress yourself. Just focus on the baby." Then he closed the study doors in her face, leaving her spinning in silence. The next morning, Julian hired private security to monitor the front gate. No one could come or go without their clearance. Elena realized then she was trapped in a gilded cage of whispered rumors and secrets. As her belly grew, Julian became increasingly absent. He'd leave early in the morning, citing urgent strategy sessions with lawyers, and entire weekends passed with Elena alone in the cavernous estate. The silence was punctuated only by the hum of central air and the quiet movements of the housekeeping staff. The house no longer felt like a home. It was a museum of quiet tension and distant glances. Every hallway echoed her solitude. Every mirror reflected her growing fear. She tried calling Naomi again, but her messages went unanswered. Outwardly, it looked like the Carters had closed ranks. Even Elena was now on the outside. Weeks turned into months. Dr. Cynthia Lang, her obstetrician, noted troubling signs. Elevated blood pressure, likely brought on by chronic stress. Concerned friends asked to visit, but security at the gate turned them away, citing Mr. Carter's instructions. Furious, Elena confronted Julian. "Why are you keeping everyone away from me? I'm not your prisoner." Julian's patience wore thin. "I'm trying to protect you from the media frenzy. Can't you see that? They're desperate for a headline." But Elena didn't believe him. The same gates that blocked paparazzi also locked her inside. There were no more soft mornings. No lingering kisses. Occasionally, Julian would press his hand to her belly to feel the baby move, then retreat into his usual cold distance. The anxiety that followed stole the joy from what should have been the most beautiful chapter of her life. Late at night, Elena sat by the nursery, imagining the soft coo of a newborn cradled in her arms. She wondered whether Julian would even be there when the baby arrived. One evening, while trying to calm her thoughts, she came across an old photo album from their Eastbridge University days. As she flipped through the pages, she smiled at photos of them laughing at school events, carefree and in love. How had those sunlit memories dimmed into this heavy silence? Then, by chance, she discovered a hidden folder tucked away in Julian's study. It contained documents from a company called Strathmore Holdings. The files referenced bank transfers to places like the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, peppered with legal disclaimers and questionable invoices. Page after page blurred together in a storm of numbers and unfamiliar names. Elena's pulse pounded as she realized Julian was far more entangled than he'd ever admitted. These weren't just rumors. This was evidence. Tears filled her eyes as she stared at the damning papers. Now she faced a gut-wrenching choice. Confront Julian, risking the collapse of everything, or stay silent, trapped in complicity. The father of her child might be neck-deep in criminal dealings. What if he ended up in prison? How could she raise a child under the weight of that truth? Was the man she fell in love with just a carefully constructed illusion? The bombshell broke one sweltering July morning. The Chicago Sentinel ran a damning exposé, headlined with leaked financial documents implicating Julian Carter and other prominent executives in a far-reaching tax evasion scheme. The name Strathmore Holdings appeared repeatedly, tying Julian to multi-million-dollar siphoning operations. The media storm was instant and unforgiving. Camera crews set up outside the estate, their lenses trained on every window, broadcasting live feeds 24/7. Elena woke to flashing camera lights piercing through the drapes. Helicopters hovered above the property, their rotors chopping the air, capturing aerial shots for the evening news. She turned on the television and saw Julian's face filling the screen. A stern-faced anchor announced, "Julian Carter, heir to the Carter real estate fortune, stands accused of orchestrating offshore tax evasion schemes valued in the tens of millions. Sources confirm the Department of Justice will file charges in the coming days." Her phone buzzed nonstop. Distant relatives, forgotten classmates, even strangers on social media flooded her inbox with questions, judgments, and thinly veiled curiosity. Elena's mind spun. Her fear for Julian's future wrestled with her own sense of betrayal. A part of her wanted to believe him, to cling to the idea of some elaborate frame-up, a vicious campaign to destroy him. But the documents in her hands told a harsher truth. That night, Julian came home, visibly worn, his tie askew, eyes shadowed with fatigue. He looked at her with a bruised expression. "Elena, they're wrong. I can beat this. My attorneys will tear this apart." She didn't reply. Instead, she placed the hidden folder, the one from his study, on the table in front of him. "What is this, Julian?" Elena demanded. "Why do these documents show the exact same illegal transactions the media is reporting?" He flinched. "You were snooping? Snooping?" Her voice broke. "I'm your wife. You locked me in this house with your secrets." Cornered and visibly worn, Julian finally confessed that the financial arrangements were complicated. He claimed that much of it was Graham's doing, that Strathmore Holdings was merely a shell company created by his father to quietly move assets. "They used my name to keep it off the official books," he said. "I didn't realize how deep it went until recently." Elena's mind spun. Was Julian a pawn or a willing accomplice, covering for his father's actions? Her chest tightened with a wave of nausea, not from the pregnancy but from the emotional betrayal twisting her insides. This was the man she had trusted with everything, and now even his sorrow felt laced with strategy. She tried to search his tearful pleas for truth, but something inside her didn't sit right. That night, they lay side by side in silence. The space between them felt impossibly wide, far too vast for whispered reassurances. Elena couldn't sleep, haunted by the thought of Julian's possible indictment and what that would mean for their unborn child. She stared at the ceiling, hand resting on her belly, wondering what kind of world she was bringing this baby into. Her mind rewound the past year, the cold silences, the unanswered questions, the walls he'd built around her. The man lying inches away might as well have been a stranger. Days later, Graham Carter summoned them to a discreet meeting at the Carter Corporation's downtown Chicago headquarters. The towering steel and glass structure loomed over the city. Photographers swarmed the sidewalks outside, but security rushed them into a private elevator that took them straight to the top floor. Inside the executive suite, Graham sat behind a massive desk, flanked by corporate attorneys and legal strategists. His gaze fell briefly on Elena's swollen belly before flicking away, like her presence was merely a distraction. "We need to protect the Carter name," he said coolly, steepling his fingers. "This fiasco has damaged our legacy." He launched into a plan developed with the company's legal team, a full spin operation. The strategy would cast Julian as an unsuspecting victim, deceived by unethical accountants. All blame would fall on a nameless CFO who supposedly manipulated the financial structure behind Julian's back. Elena stiffened. They were rewriting the narrative, shifting the blame to an easy target. What if that man was innocent too? Graham's voice remained even, controlled. "We'll issue a public statement soon. Julian's position must be made clear. And you, Elena, you'll need to stand beside him and confirm your husband had no knowledge of the shady dealings." "Understood?" Her throat closed. She turned toward Julian. He shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Did he expect her to lie? To go along with this to protect his father? 1,000 thoughts crashed through her mind. How easily they expected her to fold, to become another silent figurehead in their machine. How little her values seemed to matter in this room, filled with polished ambition and legal spin. Elena wanted to stand up for her own principles, but she sat alone in a room full of powerful men in tailored suits. Her belly, visibly round with their child, felt like a symbol of how trapped she had become. Her mind raced. Was she really expected to compromise her values to shield the Carter name? When she didn't respond right away, Graham's expression hardened. We all have something to lose. My dear, I trust you're loyal to your husband and to this family. Graham's voice was soft, but the cold threat beneath it was impossible to miss. Out in the corridor, Elena turned to Julian, eyes blazing. What about that CFO? Do we even know he was the one behind this? Julian avoided her gaze. This is bigger than us, Elena. We have to do whatever it takes. The words cut deep. The man she loved was either too afraid or too complicit to speak the truth. Reeling, Elena realized Julian might be willing to sacrifice anyone to protect himself. She remembered the vow she made on their wedding day, to stand by him in sickness and in health. But no one had warned her about moral sickness, about complicity in crime. That vow had never felt so fragile. She felt her chest tighten as the realization sank deeper. Her marriage wasn't just cracking. It was unraveling under the weight of lies she hadn't signed up for. The man who once made promises under starlit skies now stood before her asking for silence, not trust. And yet, later that night, alone in their bedroom, while Julian worked behind closed doors again, Elena found herself staring at the ceiling, wrestling with doubt. What if protecting him, even just for now, meant protecting her children's future too? The thought unsettled her. A part of her wanted to believe that compliance might buy stability, might preserve some sliver of a life she once envisioned. But as quickly as the thought came, guilt followed. She hated herself for even entertaining it. The next week unfolded like something from a surreal legal drama. Newspapers screamed fresh allegations each morning. More offshore accounts, covert real estate transfers, untraceable hush money payments. Elena struggled to separate fact from media sensationalism. Graham's PR team unleashed a coordinated narrative painting Julian as the unsuspecting heir, manipulated by devious executives. Some outlets ran with it. Others dug deeper, fueling speculation that the Carters were staging a cover-up. On social media, the frenzy intensified. Elena's name trended alongside hashtags branding her everything from a manipulative gold digger to a naive, broken victim. Strangers online debated whether she had played a role in the scheme. Some even claimed her pregnancy was a calculated sympathy ploy. The anxiety ate away at her. Every kick, every movement from the life inside her reminded Elena she was carrying innocence into a world laced with corruption and lies. At night, she'd sit in the nursery, unfinished and echoing with silence, wondering if her children would grow up bearing the weight of their father's choices. She pressed her hands to her belly and whispered apologies she didn't know how to explain. In quiet moments, she prayed for discernment, for strength to navigate right and wrong in a world that felt utterly upside down. Then came the breaking point. The Department of Justice filed formal charges against Julian Carter. The case cited internal whistleblower testimony from within Carter Properties. A court date was set. Elena's chest ached at the thought of Julian standing trial, of the man she married in a courtroom, possibly facing years in prison. Love tangled with betrayal, anger with fear, and beneath it all, a deep longing for the simpler life she once knew, long before boardrooms and headlines. She remembered weekend walks through the park, spontaneous coffee dates, laughter over burnt pancakes. When had it all slipped away? When had love become a mask for strategy? Despite the turmoil, life moved forward. Her OB/GYN appointments confirmed a shocking development. She wasn't carrying one baby. She was having twins. As if one new life wasn't already overwhelming enough. Now she carried two souls who would depend on her decisions. When she told Julian, he looked stunned, for a moment even joyful. "That's incredible," he murmured. But before she could savor the moment, his phone rang. "Sweetheart, I'm sorry. I have to go." And he went. And he did. leaving Elena to face the final stretch of her pregnancy alone, fraught with anxiety. The paparazzi stalked her every move. Her only moments of peace came in the early dawn, when the world was quiet and she could feel the soft flutter of her twins, reminding her that there was still something to fight for. Then came the day of Julian's first court appearance, a preliminary hearing before the official trial. He left early that morning with his attorney, Marcus Fields, a high-profile litigator once rumored to have represented several Wall Street magnates. Elena, now in her third trimester, hadn't planned to attend. Julian had insisted she stay home and rest. But something deep in her gut told her she needed to be there. Summoning her courage, she called for a cab and made her way to the downtown courthouse. Protesters and supporters clashed outside the building, waving signs with slogans like "Justice for Carter" and "Lock him up." Police lined the steps, forming barricades to contain the commotion. The tension in the air was electric. Inside the courtroom, reporters filled the gallery. Elena slipped quietly into a back row, hoping to go unnoticed. But it didn't take long for the cameras to spot her. She tried to concentrate on the hearing. The judge read out the charges, and Julian's attorney entered a plea of not guilty. But as the prosecution detailed the extent of the allegations, shell companies, forged documents, and damning email threads, Elena felt her heart sink. Julian sat tensely beside his lawyer, casting furtive glances across the room. But he never saw his wife, sitting quietly behind the sea of spectators. Graham Carter sat in the reserved section, unmoved, eyes locked forward. When the session ended, Elena slipped out quickly, eyes brimming with tears. She wanted to believe in Julian, to believe in his innocence, but the facts were damning. Outside, she was immediately swarmed by reporters. A microphone thrust into her face. "Elena, do you think your husband is guilty? Will you testify against him?" Another shouted, "Is it true you're having twins?" Panicked, Elena cradled her belly and pushed through the mob. She barely made it to the taxi, her heart thudding wildly. Once home, she locked herself in the bathroom. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered to her unborn children, "What am I going to do?" The following days blurred together. Julian's legal team worked around the clock, preparing for the main trial. Graham orchestrated settlement deals and press statements. The family insisted Elena stay away from court to avoid stress. But a heavy sense of dread settled over her. She felt like she was teetering on the edge of something irreversible. Then, 2 weeks later, everything shifted. At 8 months pregnant, Elena was jolted awake by sharp pain in her abdomen. Alarmed, she paged Dr. Lang, who told her to come to the hospital immediately. She dialed Julian, no answer. She tried again, leaving frantic voicemails. Finally, a text came through. "In a critical meeting, what's going on?" Elena's fingers trembled as she typed, "I think I'm in labor. Severe contractions. It's early." Seconds later, his response appeared. "I can't leave right now. I'll come when I'm done." The message chilled Elena to her core. She was possibly going into premature labor with twins, and the father of her children was too busy to come. Mustered by sheer will, Elena arranged for a car to take her to the hospital. Doctors confirmed it. She was in early labor. Nurses rushed her into a private birthing suite, hooking her up to monitors that tracked the baby's heartbeats. The blur of white coats, the sterile brightness of surgical lights, and the sharp scent of antiseptic overwhelmed her. Hours crawled by. Each contraction was sharper than the last. Dr. Lang administered medication to delay labor, hoping to give the twins more time. Elena's thoughts turned foggy from exhaustion and pain. She kept glancing toward the door, hoping Julian would burst through and take her hand, but he never came. Alone, she cried out, gripping the hospital bed's rails as sorrow engulfed her. And then, in the haze of pain and desperation, she whispered his name. "Julian, please." The words slipped from her lips before she could stop them. It wasn't a plea of reconciliation, just a raw instinct, an echo of a time when he was still the person she trusted most. As soon as she heard herself, shame rushed in. She bit her lip and turned her face to the wall, angry with her own heart for still reaching out. Her mind drifted back to when Julian first said he loved her under a sky full of stars. The joy on his face the day she told him she was pregnant. Where was that man now? The nurses did what they could to comfort her, but nothing touched the ache inside. Eventually, the labor slowed. Doctors decided to keep her under observation. Later that night, Elena awoke to the soft hum of machines and an empty chair beside her bed. Still no Julian. Instead, she found a voicemail. "Sorry, something came up with my father. How are you feeling?" The hollowness of it cut deep. In that moment, Elena understood the truth. Whatever bond they once shared had withered beyond recognition. If Julian could abandon her during this moment of fear and vulnerability, she would find a way to survive without him. 2 days later, doctors stabilized her enough to go home, on strict bed rest. But she didn't go to the Carter estate. Instead, the driver dropped her at a modest condo she had quietly rented weeks earlier, preparing for the worst. Using savings from her old scholarship and a small inheritance from her father, she had secured the place, a humble 2-bedroom with a compact kitchen. It wasn't luxurious, but it was hers. She left a note at the estate explaining she needed space for the rest of her pregnancy. Then she powered off her phone, ignoring Julian's dozens of missed calls, as well as those from Graham and the legal team. The moment she stepped into the condo, she felt a flicker of freedom. No iron gates, no surveillance, no judgmental eyes, just space, enough to breathe, to think, to prepare. It wasn't easy. Being heavily pregnant and alone brought challenges. There was no staff to help her up or fix her meals, but she found peace in setting up a simple nursery. She hung soft curtains in pastel shades, pieced together a second-hand crib, and pinned up little drawings she'd sketched, images of a future she hoped would be grounded in truth, not illusion. Some nights the pain in her back made standing a struggle. Others, she lay silently, tears falling as she questioned if she had made the right choice. But every time doubt crept in, she replayed that hospital memory, the pain, the fear, and the empty chair. That memory hardened her like steel. Eventually, she turned her phone back on, steeling herself for the flood of messages. One voicemail stood out. Naomi Brooks, her journalist friend. "Elena, I know it's been chaotic, but there's something you need to see. Call me. It's important." Elena called, breath catching. Naomi's voice trembled. "I just got a tip. Julian's facing new charges. They found a paper trail. He personally signed off on multiple illegal transactions. This goes beyond his father. There are insiders at Carter Properties." "People inside Carter Properties are saying Julian was the mastermind," Naomi said quietly. "The prosecution might call you to testify." Elena's heart pounded. If she were subpoenaed, she couldn't lie. She wouldn't. "He's the father of my children," she whispered. "But I can't perjure myself." "I know," Naomi replied, her voice soft. "I'm sorry, Elena. Just be prepared." 1 week later, the contractions returned, stronger, sharper. Elena gasped as the pain intensified. She called for an ambulance, and within minutes she was rushed through the bustling streets of Chicago, sirens blaring. Fear clashed with determination in her chest. "I can do this," she told herself. "I have to." At Mercy General Medical Center, her world became a blur. Hallways lit in sterile white, voices urgent and focused. Nurses ushered her into a delivery suite, where she prayed not just for a safe delivery, but for her children to enter a world untouched by the Carter scandal. No cameras, no headlines, just life. Labor came hard and fast, waves of pain, measured breathing, and finally, 2 cries that pierced the air. Her son was born first, then her daughter. Both crying, both alive. Tears of awe and relief streaked Elena's face as she cradled them. Their tiny chests heaved with each breath, their eyes wide and searching. She named the boy Ethan and the girl Isla, names she had carried in her heart for months. At that moment, the chaos of the world melted away. A tidal wave of love surged through her, so fierce it stole her breath. These 2 perfect souls were hers, and she would protect them with everything she had. She gazed at their faces, perfect and pure, and felt the ache of Julian's absence, but she pushed the sadness down. She was enough. She had to be. Later that day, Naomi arrived with flowers and a gift bag full of baby clothes. Her visit filled the room with warmth and laughter, a temporary balm for Elena's uncertainty. She learned that Julian still hadn't responded to the news of the labor. It hurt, but she accepted it. Hospital staff adored the twins, doting on their matching features and delicate expressions. Elena was spellbound by her children. The scandals, the headlines, the court dates, all of it shrank beneath the gravity of what truly mattered. Still, she knew reality waited on the other side of those hospital doors. Soon, she'd have to face Julian, and Graham, and the courts. But for now, she let herself have this peace. 2 days later, just as Elena was getting ready for discharge, someone appeared who made her pulse race. Julian. He came unannounced, his hair disheveled, his polished demeanor stripped away, replaced by raw desperation. In his hands was a bouquet of roses. Elena's heart pounded as he entered the room. For a long moment, they both stared at the sleeping twins in their hospital bassinets. Julian's expression was unreadable, equal parts awe and fear. Finally, he turned to Elena. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know you'd gone into labor until it was too late." Elena's voice was calm but cold. "You didn't check your phone. It's not that you didn't know. You chose not to come." He exhaled, shaky and unsure, stepping closer to the bassinets. "They're beautiful," he murmured. His voice cracked. "Elena, I need to fix this. The scandal, the legal issues. I'm in deep. But if you stand beside me, we have a better chance. We can show the court I'm a family man who made naive mistakes. We can fight this, together." She blinked, stunned. "Are you asking me to lie for you? To act like everything's fine while you dodge accountability?" His jaw tightened. "We don't have to lie. Just frame things in a way that doesn't make it worse. Confirm that I was a loving husband, that I never mentioned any of the transactions to you. With you on my side, we'd be unstoppable." Anger flared in Elena's chest. She glanced at the twins, so innocent, unaware of the storm around them, then back at Julian. For a brief second, her mind flickered with memory of the man who once held her hand beneath city lights, who made grand promises in whispered tones. She had loved him. Maybe part of her still did. But this version of Julian, the one before her now, was asking her to surrender her conscience for his redemption. "I'm not lying," she said firmly. "My children deserve a father they can look up to, not someone who manipulates the truth." Frustration flashed across Julian's face. He glanced around, searching for words that might change her mind. "Think about it. If I go to prison, what happens to you? To them. If I'm acquitted, you'll have security, stability." "I'd rather struggle with integrity than live under $1 million lie," she shot back. The words left her mouth like stone, heavy, final. But behind her defiance was grief. Grief for the future she had imagined, for the man she once believed in. Tears stung her eyes, but her voice never wavered. "Leave." Julian hesitated, pain etched into his features. Then, silently, he placed the roses on a nearby table and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. Elena's body sagged into the hospital bed. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she looked at her sleeping babies. She knew this wouldn't be the last confrontation. A fierce sense of maternal resolve rose inside her. She would shield them from the Carter family's shadows, no matter the cost. Just as Naomi had warned, a subpoena arrived at Elena's condominium 1 week after she brought the twins home. Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope. She was required to testify at Julian's trial the following month. The thought of sitting in open court, of recounting painful truths about their private life, made her stomach twist. But at the same time, she felt something unexpected. Relief. It was time to tell the truth. The twins lay nearby, their tiny bodies breathing in quiet rhythm. Elena stood tall. Her testimony would be honest. No matter the pain, her children deserved a mother who stood for truth, even if their father did not. In the days that followed, she met with the prosecution, recounting everything she knew, the suspicious files, the day Julian locked himself in the study, Graham's efforts to cover it up. She kept her statements factual, refusing to embellish or dramatize. And with each detail she revealed, she realized how deep Julian's deception had gone. The night before the trial, Elena barely slept. She paced her small living room, pausing each time she heard one of the twins stir. Legal counsel had arranged for a private escort to get her into the courthouse without encountering the media frenzy. It offered some logistical relief, but none for the dread twisting her gut. As she rocked baby Ela back to sleep, she whispered a silent prayer. That truth would win out, regardless of the consequences. On a crisp Chicago morning, Elena arrived at the Cook County Superior Court. She wore a simple black dress, her hair tied neatly in a bun. Microphones and cameras clogged the courthouse steps, but she slipped through a side entrance thanks to security. Her heels echoed down the marble hallways, in sync with the pounding of her heart. Inside the courtroom, Julian sat at the defense table beside his attorney, Marcus Fields, and another suited associate. His expression was grave. His eyes briefly met hers, then quickly dropped. Behind him, Graham Carter sat like a statue, silent, stern, a father shielding his legacy. The trial opened with statements from both sides. The prosecution laid out a methodical timeline of the alleged financial misconduct: wire transfers, encrypted messages, falsified accounting. The defense pushed back, challenging the credibility of the documents and accusing whistleblowers of manipulation. Elena felt her chest tighten every time Julian's name was spoken aloud. Then it came. The court calls Elena Morris to the stand. Her legs felt unsteady as she made her way to the witness box. After swearing in, she took her seat. Her gaze swept from the judge to Julian. He watched her, face tense. Was he silently pleading? The prosecutor began gently, asking about her relationship with Julian, how they met, her living situation, and her experience during the early stages of the investigation. Gradually, the focus narrowed. Did your husband, Julian Carter, ever ask you to lie about his involvement or knowledge of these offshore transactions? The room stilled. Elena could feel her own heartbeat. She saw the memory play out again, her hospital room, the twins asleep, Julian begging her to support his narrative. She licked her lips, nodded slowly. Yes, she said. He asked me to present a version of events where he appeared unaware of anything illegal. He wanted me to support that image. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously. The defense objected, but the judge overruled it. Elena's words remained on record. She glanced at Julian. His face had gone pale. Graham's jaw clenched tightly behind him. The prosecutor thanked her. Then came the cross-examination. Marcus Fields tried to discredit her, calling her emotionally unstable, overwhelmed with postpartum stress, possibly acting out of spite. "Isn't it true, Miss Morris," he asked, "that your testimony is driven by resentment toward Mr. Carter for abandoning you during your pregnancy?" Elena's voice trembled, but her resolve stayed steady. "No, I'm here to tell the truth. Not to seek revenge, I only want what's right." With that, the cross-examination ended. She stepped down, legs trembling, eyes glassy with tears. She had just spoken the truth about the father of her children in front of the world. Outside the courtroom, Elena sat on a wooden bench, hugging herself to keep warm. Her body was cold, but her conscience had never felt clearer. Then she saw her friend, Naomi, pushing a twin stroller down the hallway. Ethan and Isla sat peacefully inside, tiny feet kicking, wide eyes scanning the space, without understanding the turmoil around them. Naomi had volunteered to care for them during Elena's testimony and had returned early. Elena's heart softened. Moments later, Julian appeared, stepping out of the courtroom beside his attorney. Julian's eyes landed on the stroller. His face went pale. He took an unsteady step forward, as if pulled by some deep, dormant instinct. The hallway seemed to still. Reporters, attorneys, and passers-by halted, breath caught, unsure of what would unfold. Julian moved slowly toward the stroller, each footstep heavy with visible regret. He gazed at the twins, his son Ethan, with a faint tuft of chestnut hair, and his daughter Isla, eyes wide with curiosity. They reached out with small hands, cooing softly. Something inside Julian cracked. His chest rose and fell rapidly. His expression twisted. Then, without warning, his knees buckled. He collapsed onto the polished courthouse floor. Gasps echoed across the corridor. A wave of noise surged as on-site paramedics rushed to his side. They checked his pulse, then began administering aid, attaching wires and an IV. Cameras exploded with flashes, catching every second of the surreal moment. Elena stood frozen in place, shock coursing through her. Emotions collided. Worry, frustration, disbelief. The father of her children had been undone by a glimpse of the life he had nearly lost. But beneath the chaos, another feeling stirred. An ache she didn't want to name. She hadn't expected him to crumble like this. Not Julian, the man who always wore confidence like armor. For a split second, she saw the man she once loved, not the defendant, not the public figure, but just Julian, a broken man, unmasked. She realized Julian's collapse wasn't just physical. It was the weight of guilt, of fear, of facing the full consequence of his choices. Medics revived him within minutes. Disoriented, Julian blinked, then scanned the crowd until his eyes found on the stroller. Tears streamed down his cheeks. In that moment, strapped to a gurney, he seemed to understand what he had risked and what he might never reclaim. He was wheeled out toward an ambulance. The flashing lights painted the faces of the silent onlookers. This was the crescendo of a day already heavy with revelation. Julian's collapse triggered a media firestorm. That night, every cable news station played the footage on a loop. Julian Carter, embattled real estate heir, faints upon seeing his newborn twins. Speculation erupted. Some pundits called it a calculated move to sway jury sympathy. Others said it was the inevitable crack in the armor of a man burdened by denial and consequences. Back in her modest condo, Elena watched the coverage in silence. Exhaustion clouded her face. She clutched the twins close, shielding them from the noise pouring from the television. Her phone buzzed with endless messages, some supportive, others vicious. She powered it off. Later that night, Naomi stopped by, carrying a tray of homemade lasagna and a long overdue hug. They sat on the floor while the babies slept peacefully nearby. "People are torn," Naomi said gently. "Some say Julian's a fraud. Others think he finally broke under pressure. But your testimony, it hit hard. Legal analysts say it could be the tipping point." Elena swallowed the lump in her throat. She thought about all the years she'd spent loving Julian, all the ways she had once believed in him, and the heartbreak of realizing that staying true to herself meant walking away from him. "If I lied," Elena murmured, "I didn't want it to end this way." Naomi placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Whatever happens, you did what you had to do. I'm proud of you, for standing up for yourself, for the truth." Quiet wrapped around them. Outside, the lights of downtown Chicago shimmered in the dark. Elena gazed at her two sleeping babies, captivated by the rise and fall of their tiny chests. She whispered a silent promise. No matter what storms the future held, she would raise these children with every ounce of honesty and love in her soul. The trial dragged on another week. Witnesses and financial experts unraveled the intricate structures of Carter's corporate empire. Elena's attorney advised her to stay available, but she was never called back. She waited, tense, dreading a summons that never came. Then the jury went into deliberation, and the next morning, they returned. Elena didn't attend the courtroom. Instead, she stayed home, Ethan and Isla in her lap, watching the live broadcast on TV. Julian stood at the defense table as the foreman read the verdict. Guilty. Multiple counts. Fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy. Bail was revoked. He would be taken into custody immediately. Elena's heart thundered. She thought she'd feel relief. Closure. But instead, there was only a hollow ache. Julian was still the father of her children. The cameras zoomed in on Graham Carter, whose stunned face twisted in disbelief as officers cuffed his son. Julian went quietly, eyes glazed, his world reduced to white noise. Then came a moment that stopped everything. As Julian paused at the courtroom door, he turned toward the cameras and murmured a single line. "Elena, please forgive me." The footage aired on every major network. Pundits speculated for days. Would she forgive him? Would she speak it? Would she speak out? Would she stand by him? Elena didn't answer. She rocked Ethan gently, patting his back as tears slipped silently down her cheeks. She thought about the life they nearly had, a love built on trust, a father who might have cherished his children. But Julian's ambition, his secrets, they shattered that dream. She kissed Isla's forehead. She would raise these babies alone. In the weeks following Julian's conviction, Elena received a flood of messages, book deals, talk show invitations, tabloid offers. More than once, she drafted a response, one email, one interview agreement, just to tell her side. To show the world that she wasn't the naive girl the headlines made her out to be, that she had bled and broken and survived. But each time, before hitting send, she deleted it. She turned them all down. What she craved most was peace, a quiet life, a place to rebuild without the Carter name shadowing every step. Julian's legal team filed appeals, but experts gave them little hope. Meanwhile, Graham Carter faced his own federal inquiry, rumored to be wider in scope. The Carter business empire buckled. Stock values plummeted. Layoffs began. Protesters camped outside corporate offices, demanding justice. Elena knew her testimony had sealed Julian's fate. But she didn't feel pride or regret. She had simply told the truth. With her modest savings, she carved out a new beginning. Through her old contacts at the women's shelter, she was hired to teach financial literacy workshops for underserved women, finally using her economics degree for something that mattered. It wouldn't make her wealthy, but it paid the bills. Each morning she balanced the twins on her hips, prepping her materials, determined to rebuild. one small step at a time. At night, loneliness sometimes crept in. She missed Julian's laughter, his arm around her shoulder, his whispered dreams. But every time she started to waver, she remembered that hospital bed, how he never came. There was no going back. Months passed. Then came sentencing day. Elena wasn't sure she should go, but deep down, she knew she needed to. She found a sitter and made her way to the courthouse. As she entered, murmurs followed her. Reporters recognized her instantly, peppering her with questions she ignored. Inside the courtroom, Julian stood before the judge, shoulders sagging beneath the weight of his sentence. The judge's voice was firm but controlled. 8 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole after 5, plus significant fines and restitution. A heavy silence settled over the courtroom. Julian turned slowly, his eyes finding Elena in the back row. For a fleeting second, something passed between them. Regret, sorrow, maybe even a final apology. She thought she saw his lips form the words, "I'm sorry." Then the officers led him away. That was it, the end of Julian Carter's free life. The closing chapter of the story they once lived together. Elena rose quietly and exited the courtroom. Outside, reporters and photographers clamored for a quote, but she said nothing. She simply walked, the crisp fall air filling her lungs. There was nothing left to say to the cameras. Her only focus now was home, where 2 tiny lives waited. That evening, as she held Ethan and Isla close, she watched them giggle and coo, blissfully unaware of the chaos that had surrounded their arrival. In their laughter, she found hope. A flicker of warmth spread in her chest, the kind she hadn't felt in months. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was something sturdier. The first step toward healing. A reminder that even the most painful endings carry the potential for new beginnings. She kissed their cheeks and whispered, "We'll be okay." And so Elena's journey, from loyal wife to single mother forging her own future, became a story not of scandal, but of strength. A story about the power of truth, the price of betrayal, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her children. Despite everything, despite the loss, the media storm, the courtroom glare, her story is proof that even in life's darkest moments, resilience can illuminate the way forward. In the end, Elena had protected what mattered most. Her integrity, her twins, her future. Now standing at the threshold of an unwritten chapter, she faced life with a full heart, ready to move forward, guided by honesty and love. What a journey you've stayed with us through, dear friends. If you're still here right now, that means something in this story touched your heart in some way. And now together, let's look at it from a different lens, not with judgment, not with blame, but simply with truth. Elena's story isn't just about scandal or betrayal. It's about the raw human capacity to endure, to rebuild, and to choose honesty over comfort. When the people we love most let us down, when the world spirals into noise and headlines, we often find ourselves at a crossroads. Elena didn't just walk away from Julian, she walked toward something, toward clarity, toward integrity, toward a life where her children could grow up seeing courage, not compromise. Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." In the quiet hours of heartbreak, Elena mastered herself, not with force, but with love and truth. She didn't let betrayal define her. She let resilience lead her. And isn't that something we all strive for? Maybe you're not standing in a courtroom. Maybe your trial is quieter, an unspoken tension at home, a loss you haven't named yet, a choice you keep avoiding. But still, you're here, still breathing, still capable of choosing honesty, compassion, and courage. So if this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Not just because it helps us grow, but because every click supports stories like Elena's. Stories that matter. Stories that remind us we can break, we can hurt, and still we can begin again. Because the greatest endings aren't always loud. Sometimes they whisper, "We'll be okay."